a.m. weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share, and collaborate.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. And I am really excited today to have Eric McNulty back on the show, although the first time live. So, this is kind of a new thing for us here. And we're talking about developing the meta leader at the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, the NPLI. And NPLI is a joint program, if you guys don't know, with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Say Harvard a lot in that conversation. So, it's really kind of a cool place. They are leading in the concept of research in leadership, specifically in disaster and crisis leadership. Eric, if you guys don't know, has written the book, or was one of the co-authors, I should say, of the book You're It. And that was on the book of the 10 books that emergency managers should have on their bookshelf and read. All right. And also, Eric is a contributing member of the Crisis Response Journal, which is a really great magazine, by the way, a journal, if you will. Highly recommend that you get it. And hey, we're also having a webinar coming up. We're giving away one of those electronic subscriptions to that. So, Eric, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Todd. It's great to be here.
How have you been?
Terrific. Thank you very much. It's been a good time to be in crisis leadership, which is kind of scary sometimes, but there's always plenty to do.
So we've talked before the concept of meta leadership, and you talk about it a lot in your book, You're It. Highly recommend it again to read it. But let's just go over really quick. What exactly does meta leadership mean?
Well, we look at leading through crises as being different than managing the crisis. And leading is taking that broader view, seeing the bigger picture, looking at all the stakeholders, what are not just the short-term consequences, but the long-term consequences. So it's really built around understanding yourself as a person, being able to accurately diagnose the situation, and not just have awareness, but have insight as to what's going on. And then building connectivity. So building those robust relationships down to your team, up to your boss or bosses, to a political official if you report to someone like that, across within the organization so all the departments are working in sync, and then out to external stakeholders as well. So you're really looking at the full range of people who are involved in an incident and who are essential to your success.
So as somebody who strives to be a leader, right? As an emergency manager, we should be a leader. How do we develop ourselves into becoming a meta leader?
Well, I think it really is about understanding the two lenses of what's happening now and what's happening next. And that's the piece where I find that really differentiates those from who both manage and lead well. And I'm very much of the school that I see leading and managing as complementary skill sets. I don't think, oh, you're a manager, but you're a leader, sort of as if it's tattooed on you someplace. So it's that ability when you're managing, you're getting things done right now. It's today. Allocating resources, making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. And the leading piece is taking you into that future, even amidst uncertainty. So what's going to happen next? And you're thinking about tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and anticipating what's going to be coming. So when we bring people through our courses, whether they're in person or online, we work through a lot of scenarios and case studies to get people to see and sort of tease out how you do that and how you make sure you can remember to not just look down at your dashboard, but look out the window once in a while too to see what's coming at you.
Absolutely. Speaking of meta leaders, Dan Scott is joining us now. He's running a little late because he was dealing with a crisis of his own. Dan, welcome to the show, and I'm glad that you dealt with that problem. And whew,
good morning and welcome, Eric. It's great to have you on the show today, and it's actually a great honor for me to actually be able to talk to you today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. I'm glad you made it in.
So when you guys start, and I say you guys, the NPLI, start to take a look at your leadership curriculum, and before the advantage of going to NPLI was going, well, I wouldn't say it's an advantage going to Harvard, especially during the winter time, but I'm being out here in California, it's a little chilly out. That's all I'm saying. So the advantage is going over to Harvard, meeting people, interacting with people. But I know because of COVID, you've moved to an online platform. What was the challenge of that?
Thank you. It was really interesting because you're right. A big part of going to an executive education program in residence is you get to meet a lot of people. You get to hang out with them. You build relationships. That's a big part of what you take away. And so thinking about moving those online, we were really challenged. I have to say that this is one of those lucky moments where the technology on the up curve came right as the situation was going downward, and that the capabilities now in these video conferencing platforms, be it Zoom or others, we happen to use Zoom, has been really good. And so we're able to build in a lot of breakout rooms. So we're still going to do small group discussion. We work through case studies. It's actually a bit easier now to bring in people as guest speakers. So we had Pete Gaynor in. We had a program that ran in December. Pete Gaynor came in and talked about leading through COVID. We've got an expert on combating violent extremism coming up next week in a program. And so we're able to get folks who, without worrying about travel and time zones and all that, it's a lot easier. But it really has been work. And I would say all the faculty has tried very hard to make sure that people feel like they're part of a community when they're in a program, even if they're on Zoom and aren't together. We don't get to go out for a beer. We don't get to have coffee together, but part of a community. And so we've intentionally structured the programs to provide a lot of interaction and give people plenty of time to form those relationships, because we want them to continue the community once they've gone back to their day jobs.
So the program that you guys offer is an amazing program. It's one that I one day hope to go through myself. And I've done some review on it and looked at it. In the audience that you target, do you find that it's more of senior leadership that comes through these programs versus those who are just entering into leadership capacity?
Well, the good news is we now have multiple programs. So for a long time, we just had the one executive education program. It was a very senior audience, and they would come twice to Harvard and work a project in between over a 6-month period. Now we have an emerging leaders in crisis program that kicks off in March. This year it'll be online. Next year it'll be back in person. But that is for folks who are earlier in their career. It's still an intensive and immersive experience, but it's geared toward folks who are just coming up. And then we also have these two purely online courses we developed this year because of COVID, a core course and then an advanced course. And that got a real mix. So we had the head of a government agency whose name I won't mention, but it was the administrator who came through it. And we had folks who were shortly out of college. And they actually did a great job of learning from each other. So I actually liked that mix of people at different stages. And they brought different perspectives, and it was really actually a very dynamic environment.
So when you talk about leadership in general, right, and I think this is something that's people talk, you either develop leadership or you're born into be a born leader, or sometime in somewhere in between. And one of the questions I have specifically about developing leaders, right now, we have a new generation of emergency managers coming, crisis leadership coming from behind us. We have those that are leaving, that are retiring, that are in front of us, and you have those that are in the middle, and like, so you're at different levels. How do we encourage the younger generation coming up behind us to pick up leadership roles, and how do we mentor them into those roles?
Well, I think you can begin to teach people to think like leaders even very early in their career. And a great book I recommend in this area is called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. You guys may have read it. It's a really very practical book. And in that, he's a captain of a nuclear submarine and talks about getting every member of his crew to think like leaders, which meant, again, seeing that bigger picture and how what they were doing fit into the larger mission of the vessel. So he, still had a chain of command. This is still the military. Doesn't mean no one's in charge or everyone's in charge, but he got them thinking that way. And I think we can all do that, is begin to get people to understand not just what to do, but why they're doing it and how it fits into that larger picture. That begins to build the perspective and helps them see how they can contribute as leaders and not just in a purely functional role.
Absolutely. And we had David Marquet, captain, here on the show, and for his book Turn the Ship Around. And also he has another book which I find really interesting. It's called Leadership as Language, and talking about how you approach, how you say things, do things, and what that means. And I think that's another good follow-up book for him, and he's a great author.
It's terrific.
So absolutely. So Dan, what do you think?
No, I agree. I think that the whole concept of the book that was just mentioned is amazing as far as having continually having to ask for permission versus taking initiative and making a statement as if I'm going to do something and getting it seconded by your command. What I and I've said this many times on both shows is that I feel like leadership is one of the most understudied skills in emergency management. I feel like and this is leading to the question is we kind of get again in our comfort zone, and if we do read or if we do study, it's usually in an area that we have more of an interest. How do we direct those who are entering the field, who are starting to read, study, grow, to expand their focus and be more diverse in in the aspects of which they study leadership? Meaning, you study the military, we study private organizations, we study those who have done it in emergency management. So how do we get the student or the next coming in new emergency management practitioner or professional to say, well, I should not be single mindset. I should look more into and study leadership, study crisis management, study management itself in approaching of the job.
Well, I think it's a great point you raised, Dan, and I think that the trick here is to get people to separate a specialty function and a general set of skills. And leading is a generalist undertaking, because you have to understand psychology and organizational behavior. And these days you have to understand a bit of neuroscience. There's all kinds of things that go into that area we call leadership, but it's understanding people, understanding organizations, and how they work together. And so I think it's, I always think it's good with younger people or at any point in their career. The most successful leaders I see are people who are widely read and who study widely, who are very curious about the people around them, the world around them. They may be into geography or history or whatever it happens to be, but they're always learning. And I think if we can tee up the people early on that, yes, you need to understand the management stuff, you need to know ICS, you need to know these functional specialty skills and bodies of knowledge, but that is not sufficient. If you really want to be successful long term, you've got to think more broadly than that. How do you understand the different stakeholder communities out there, the communities you're serving? How do you understand the other actors with, be it the private sector, nonprofit? And that's by getting out and experiencing them, but also studying these broader disciplines. So you have a really always growing and very integrated knowledge base to draw from. Because again, if you're just that narrow specialist, you'll do well on a run-of-the-mill emergency. But when you get to a true crisis where it's big, the scope is big and it gets complex, you'll really struggle. But if you actually can connect with people, understand what motivates them, understand how to be present and what that means to the people who you want to follow you, that's when you can really thrive as a leader.
Yeah, but I mean, you some great points, and I have a follow-up question to that. And you answered some of it in your response previous, but ultimately, what a lot of people don't understand is that leadership is a skill, and it has to be continually developed and practiced. And especially with emergency management, we don't necessarily sit in executive levels. We sit in areas of the organization where we have to lead in all directions around us at all time. And is a misconception from those coming in. Well, I don't have the skill or the leadership capability, or no one's going to listen to me. Or especially right now with building the emergency management profession in an upward direction with everything going on in the world today, especially with COVID, and how the spotlight is on emergency management, emergency response, emergency and crisis management. How do we get what advice do you have, I should say, for those who are saying, I'm not in a position to lead?
Well, a couple of answers there. And one is, it's interesting because I've recently been hearing about people talking about a C-level emergency management position in corporations, and whether it's called, chief emergency management officer or something else, but somebody who understands that domain so that when an organization does get into a crisis, or hopefully it can avoid them by being smart about preparedness and mitigation, but also when it gets into a situation, we'll have the skill set to be able to get out of it. That's still in its infancy, and I'm just hearing little trickles about that right now. But I also think in terms of that, the second half of your question, I really encourage people to think about leading as a set of behaviors. And that means you can lead from wherever you are. So if you're just, you've got a team of 2 people plus you can lead them. Then you're going to think about leading up to your boss. And I think here a good way to start that conversation is to engage that person and ask them some questions. So if X happens, whether it's the facility floods or a coronavirus hits, as you're thinking about the risks you're going to face, hey, what are the first 2 or 3 questions you're going to expect me to be able to answer for you? That sort of engages them in a thought process and think, okay, what am I going to want to know? And then that prepares you to be able to work with them, because you really want to build a relationship with, if you're leading up, you want to build that relationship and not just think, okay, I call Dan when something goes wrong. No, actually, I want to call Dan when I'm thinking about doing something new and want to think about the risks and how we might mitigate those. I want to call Dan when we're thinking about how do we structure the organization to be as resilient as possible. That emergency management perspective is a different one than other people are going to bring to the table, and it's equally valuable. And so that's how you, I think, begin to demonstrate value in the organization, and then people begin to seek you out. And it helps to be a person people want to have around, and don't go into the EM cave too deeply and be afraid to come out. Actually get out and engage with people and have conversations around the business or the organizational issues, and don't be afraid to step up and offer an opinion.
Absolutely. I was talking about this. I just did a speech the other day for Nevada, and I was telling them the same thing. I said, one of the things that we do poorly as emergency managers is we put ourselves in the cave. We only talk to other emergency managers. We're like behind that little thing that says, break glass when emergency occurs. And we don't really work within the organization. And we have to become an integral part of the organization, and also, being able to, you really utilize our emergency management and operations plans, our business continuity plans, if you're on the business side of things, on a daily basis in decision making, not just put it on a shelf and use it later. Hey guys, real quick. Hey Dan,
Sure.
do you ever seen the VanQuest bag?
I've seen it many times, man. I'm waiting for my own.
Absolutely. It's on its way. I think I'm going to get it to you for Valentine's Day. So VanQuest is one of our sponsors here, and they have a really great bag. I love it because on the inside of them, they have that orange liner. So when you're looking for things, it's really easy to find. They're really durable. Trust me, I've ruined many of a bag just by carrying it around and throwing it around and being rough on it. So those of us that are in the field in emergency management, having that quality high vis bag is critical. So you can get that at vanquest.com. That's vanquest.com, and use EM5 weekly, all capitals, the number 5, not the written up 5, EM5 weekly as your checkout to get 10% off of your purchase.
The Outer Limits Supply Company was founded on the idea of providing high-quality first aid kits. Their goal is to supply the life-saving equipment you'll need to mitigate the majority of injuries often seen during austere times. From a minor injury on an outdoor adventure with your family to your team responding to a major traumatic event, Outer Limits Supply has the kits to manage most situations, providing practical, user-friendly first aid kits that anyone can use. Enter EM Weekly, all capitals, at checkout and save 20% off your total purchase. Go to www.outerlimitsupply.com today. That's outerlimitsupply.com.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to the sponsors, because without them, we couldn't bring you the quality content that we're bringing you today. And I do have some follow-up stuff here going on, right? So George Rose says the best leaders I've ever worked with are the best listeners. And to kind of go on what George is saying there, one of the things I've read, it says if you're leading a meeting, right, and I've seen this happen before, be the last person to speak. Don't tip your hand into like which way you believe or not, because otherwise you won't get everybody's input on an equal footing. How important is that to have that ability to, I guess for lack of a better term, stop talking and listening and getting everybody's opinion before you say anything?
Well, I think your listener was exactly right, because people who are effective leading are really good listeners, because they're always trying to bring information in, and they do want to hear what others have to say. They're not afraid of other opinions. And I think if you're in a more senior position, as soon as you state something, others are going to be trying to please you. unless you've really set a tone of, hey, I'm okay with everybody shooting down what I say, and that takes some work to build that kind of relationship. But typically, if you're in a senior position, then people will want to please you. They always want to please you. Whether they are conscious of it or not, they're going to be, let me defer to what Todd just said, or let me support what Todd just said. So being able to hold back like that is really important. Another good rule for meetings like that is no one speaks twice until everyone's spoken once, because you will get some outgoing people who will sort of dominate a conversation and some quiet people who will hold back and never get their voices in there. And so when you can set that rule, no one speaks twice until everyone's spoken once, make sure that everybody gets to say what they've got to say, and render their opinion. And obviously meetings are, depending on how much time you've got and how urgent the topic is, those kind of things. But instead of routine meetings, I think it makes a lot of sense to make sure everyone is pulled into the conversation.
I was reading this article about a financial firm in New York, and I guess they're Blackstone. That's what it was. I was trying to think of what it was. Blackstone, which is a financial firm in New York, and they are very progressive as far as the way they treat their employees and whatnot. And there was the CEO of the company was having a meeting with some of their staff, and one of the junior executives at the end of the meeting sent an email to the CEO and said, "Hey, next time you come to a meeting, please be prepared." Because I guess the guy just walked in, wasn't prepared. Please be prepared. And if you need me to stop by the office to kind of get things going, I'm more than happy to do so. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, like that is an amazing organization for a junior executive to be able to shoot that email to the CEO and not get fired. And matter of fact, the CEO shared that email amongst everybody and said, yes, please hold me accountable. And I think that's the other thing that leaders need to do is understand that their staff has them hold them accountable. And I think that was amazing.
Absolutely. That radical candor is so important, and be able, if as a leader, being open to the feedback, to saying, and they should know, because you know what? Hey boss, you look stupid when you walk in and you're unprepared. Nobody wants to walk in and look bad. So again, being able to get that unvarnished feedback in an appropriate tone, obviously, and it was done through a direct email, which actually is good. So you didn't call the person out in front of the whole group. So that's all good. And I think leaders should be welcome for that. And then be able to say, yeah, so how can I be better prepared for the next meeting? And that junior person wants to help them. Now you're building a relationship. Now it's easier to lead up. Goes back to the questions we were discussing earlier.
Absolutely.
Well, the best leaders are the ones who take their own advice, right? And they want to grow, and they want to continue to develop. They don't want to just, I made it and I'm done, right? They want to continue to grow, develop, and engage and accept the feedback that they're getting, and then make correction. But that kind of leads to, and I kind of want to touch back on and it's more for the advice from you to the leader that may, and as Todd said, we kind of in our cave of emergency management. I don't know if I want to call it a talk on my show yesterday. It was more of a rant that I did on involvement, getting involved and not waiting to be asked, to go out and get involved, to engage. So what advice would you have on the new leader that is just getting into for steps that they can do to get involved, engage others, and then and to develop their level of influence?
So often someone coming into a new role wants to do two things. One is impress everyone with how much they know, and B is to get something done, because I think those are the best ways to impress people and to ingratiate yourself into an organization or into a new role. That's exactly wrong. What you want to do is build relationships and then get some things done, and then so you do want to first start on reaching out. I think it's great to be, just as listening is so important, asking questions, being able to set up meetings with people and just ask them questions. What do you do? How long have you been here? How does what you're doing relate to what I'm doing? And do that. It's a really good way to show people you're open, to show them that you're a good person to be around. You're going to be a contributor and a good part of the team. And whenever you're curious about someone else, they tend to think well of you because they want to, they get the chance to show off a little bit. So I would focus first on building the relationships, and then through the conversations and things you have, people will figure out how smart you are, and they'll also you'll get the opportunity to get some things done. But if you don't get that trust built first, those relationships opened up, you're going to limit your ability to actually get things done over the long haul.
We actually have a question, and you answered, and a little bit of what you just said is as a small answer to that. But George Rose has a question on how do you get people, local government departments, to break down those silos, and it's an issue in which he's struggling with in his job. So would you suggest getting being able to engage them and get them to break down silos within the intergovernmental departmental work?
So one of the things you can do, and then we talk about this a lot in our MPLI courses, is don't talk about breaking down silos, talk about connecting silos. Because the questioners in the fire service, you don't want the cops running the fire department, you don't want the firefighters running the police department. Those silos exist for reasons, but they need to be well connected so they can communicate, so they can leverage each other, so they can share experience and those kind of things. So I think when you talk about connecting silos and showing appreciation for what's in those silos, it becomes less threatening to people, is one thing. And secondly, in terms of local government, I think you have to begin to connect the dots for people. Find ways to, again, this doesn't have to be a big formal effort, but simply convening people from the various silos for the cost, back when we were able to get together again, for the cost of coffee and some bagels. Talk about, throw out a scenario. What if X happens? How are we going to handle it? And just have an informal conversation. And you'll begin to build, again, the relationships and see that, we tend to think of things that go into three buckets. Here's what I do that you don't do. Here's what you do that I don't do. And when we agree on those things, then we can get to the bucket of here's the things we have to do together that neither one of us can do by ourselves. And again, by validating that each agency does certain things that nobody else is going to do or has the expertise to do, that gives them more confidence in collaboration. But also you begin to leave out on the table the things of, hey, we can only accomplish these by working together, which gives you the incentive to begin to connect the silos in better ways.
Removing personality out of that sometimes is important. And Eileen brings up a point of using technology to take the let's say personality, but taking the individual out of the question or the problems by using either anonymous questions that can go through an email, or there are some programs that you can put stuff on there and it pops up on the screen and to answer questions. Is that something that you recommend to do, as far as running the program, or do you think you need to have that personality in there to be able to have a better understanding of why the person's asking the question?
I go back and forth on that, because I was first of the do it anonymously because you feel safer school. But then I had a conversation with, as I recall, it was the head of HR from Netflix on my podcast, Later Readycast. And she was saying when they got rid of the anonymous piece and made you put your name to it, actually people got much more engaged with it. And they do a regular exercise of start, stop, continue. So here's something I think we should start doing. Here's something I really wish we would stop doing. And here's something good we should continue. They do that on a regular basis as a way of keeping their processes relevant and streamlined and from getting too much bureaucracy in the way. But they found putting names to it. And so I think, again, it depends a bit on the culture. And if you're initially in if it's a fear-based culture or people aren't comfortable, the anonymity may help. But I think you want to build to a point where, just like the story you told earlier, Todd, that person, whatever their level happens to be, can shoot an email to anybody else and say, here's what I think and here's why. And you're not defensive about it. You may agree or disagree, take the advice or not take it, but you're open to getting the feedback. And that's when organizations are really healthy.
Oh, Eileen says this is for idea generation only. Thanks for that follow-up on that one, Eileen. Excuse me.
I was just going to relate. I think the connecting silos is an amazing thought and advice. And I think a good way to think about it is a lot of the social media networking programs that are out there right now. They don't necessarily break down, but they work together, right? You can log into one and then connect other social media aspects to that one, so they work together and but they're still their own. They still have their own platform, their own networking purposes, but you can work together in connecting those online networking services you're still doing your thing, but they all feed together, they work together. So I think that's a great aspect to answer that question, but also a new line of thinking, because before, and 15 years ago when I started getting it was like, we're trying to break down silos. Well, let's stop trying to break them down. Let's connect them.
Yeah.
So we're working together.
So Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Todd. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say. So I want to talk about MPLI a little bit more because I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's a great program, and I'd like to hear what are some of the successes that you've had. Like, who has graduated from your program has like gone on to become like the the president of the United States or anything like that.
President of the United States. No. No, you haven't. We have had people who are have been heads of large organizations, heads of and number one, number two role at places like FEMA, CDC, Secret Service, and other agencies at the federal level like that. Certainly at state and local level as well. 3 out of the last 4 superintendents of the Mass State Police are alums of our program. We've had Boston police commissioners and fire commissioners come through the program. But it really, it's yes, there's quite a cadre actually who get to very prominent positions. And when I always like to say, when something big and bad goes wrong in this country, you'll find NPLI people trying to fix it. But they aren't always in that top role. Some of them are in the sort of upper mid level of things, or just doing their job. But we go throughout. We've trained more than 10,000 people when you count both our executive education programs as well as one-off seminars and things we've done across more than 100 agencies. It's federal, state, and local just in the U.S. And then I've done training around the world, mostly in the private sector, but also with the military in Singapore. And so they're out there. That's part of the value of the network. I think people say, wow, I'm glad I'm part of this family, because we never let go of people. Once they come through the program, we don't just say, that's great, thank you, have a good life. We try and, even in the midst of an incident, try and connect people so they can find their fellow alums who they may not know because they were in different cohorts, but say, okay, yeah, you need somebody over at this agency, here's who's working on this incident, give them a call. And they're able to connect quickly because they speak the same language, they've had a similar experience. And people have told us over and over again that trusted network, certainly now people who are moving to Washington with the new administration, will help them find each other, and they'll instantly have a network of professional, both peers and friends, who they can so they can get to work faster and do good things sooner.
Who should go through your program?
Everybody.
Absolutely.
No, I think we want people who aspire to lead in this profession. And that goes across the full range from preparedness through recovery, whether it be federal, state, or local. But people who really want to make an impact, who want to lead the profession to a better place, who really want to support their communities and want to have a really active role. They want the skills and the perspective on how to do that. And we work really hard to try and, like I say, get them to that. I've had people who start the program after they've been 30 years in the field. I have other folks who are very junior in the field as well, who come in, and particularly now with these online programs, which are offered we have twice a year, we're doing them. They're less expensive than coming to Harvard. You don't get to touch the ivy, but I think they're still good programs. And I say, and it really helps in the silo issue we just talked about, because they're not for single agencies, and so you'll be in there sitting with people from law enforcement, from public safety, from it could be the NTSB, or it could be the FDA, and you get to hear people who approach a problem in different ways, who think a bit differently, and you really learn a lot by hearing how different people would approach the same situation. So we've got that emerging leaders program, we've got the executive program. So I'm only kidding a little bit when I say everybody. All of your listeners, I'm sure, we would love to have in one of our programs.
How do we find out?
I'm sorry.
Go no, Dan.
How many cohorts do you guys do a year, and how competitive is the process, and how do they apply?
Thank you. So we have of our emerging leaders and our executive meta leadership program, we run one cohort each of those, and those are an application process. The emerging leaders program is coming up in March, and you apply to get into that, as with the executive program. Our core and advanced online programs, those are open enrollment, so anybody who wants to come can come to those. We have one of those also starting up in March. The information on all the programs is at npli.sph.harvard.edu. We'll be doing the core and advanced in March and April, and then we'll be doing them again in the fall. And our next executive program starts in December. We're in that once a year, goes from December to June.
Absolutely cool. So that information will also be down in the show notes as well. And guys, we are hitting into the hard stop here. So I'm gonna have to let you go. Eric, you're always welcome back on the show. Love talking to you, talk about leadership all day long and more. First of all, everybody, if you guys don't know Eric McNulty, again from MPLI, second thing is get that book You're It. It's right there behind it on the shoulder right there. Buy that book if you haven't bought it yet. It's on our read list here at EM Weekly at the top 10 books that belong on Emergency Manager's bookshelf. And like I always say, buy it and read it and apply it. Right. So I know a few people in here have said that this book has been great. Robert Whitman has put a couple of comments up there talking about what he got out of the book. So I think that's great. And Dan, thank you for being here today. And hey, everybody, you know what? I think it's really important that we have guests like Eric out here because leadership is really important. It's something that we should be focusing on as a regular basis as emergency managers, and we really need to develop it and get out there. Like we're saying before, get out there and knock on those doors and go to coffee with the people from the other divisions. Your public works, your police, your fire, your planning department. Make sure you know everybody in your city and who you're working with, and collaborate with everybody, not just other emergency managers. We do have some exciting news coming right now. We have developed the crisis the Crisis Cafe, right? And the Crisis Cafe is a place for emergency managers to get together. We can avoid all of the noise that's on other social media platforms. So join it, and it's also down in the show notes as well for Crisis Cafe. And if you like what we're doing here, please go to your favorite podcast player, hit that 5 stars, leave a review, tell your friends and colleagues what we're doing, and get more people here a part of this community. Because without you, we are nothing. It's all about the emergency management community here at EM Weekly. So I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And don't forget to join us, EM Weekly's Business Continuity Today, EM Student, and Prepare, Respond, Recover. So thank you for being with us today. And remember, follow us on your favorite podcast player, YouTube, Twitter, here on LinkedIn, and join us next week. Until then, stay safe and stay hydrated.